Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Activity Strong Executive Edition webinar. My name is Megan McMahon, and I am the Director of Strategic Development here at Link Senior. For today's webinar, we are providing one free NAB, NCAP, NCCDP, NCTRC, and NZSRDT CEU credit. To be eligible for those CEU credits today, you do need to remain in the webinar for the full hour. At the end of the webinar, we will provide the required post-webinar CEU survey evaluation link in the webinar room chat box. And I will also send that by email this afternoon, so please be sure to check your spam folder in case it lands there. The survey must be completed by midnight Eastern Time this Thursday. If you have any questions about our CEU process, you can contact us at webinars@linksenior.com. Your CEU certificates will be issued by email before the end of the day on Friday, September 9th. I will now hand it over to Charles D. Vilmorin, CEO and co-founder of Link Senior. Charles?
Thank you so much, Megan. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this September 6th Activity Strong Executive Edition. My name is Charles, as Megan mentioned. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Linked Senior, who
It looks like we may have lost Charles. If folks just give us a minute, we'll get him back on.
Okie dokie. Thanks, Megan.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. Charles is on his way back in. A little tech glitch there. Thanks for your patience, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and actually put the presentation for today in the webinar room chat box so everyone can download the deck. So you'll find that right there. And we also worked with Marvell to create a co-branded tip sheet. So I'm going to drop the link for the tip sheet in the chat box as well, so everyone can go ahead and download that as we get ready to kick off the webinar. And last but not least, Marvell, I'm going to put your website here in the chat box so that everyone can visit Marvell's website to learn more about W. Lawson. Excellent. And just a reminder for everyone today, if you have questions for Marvell as we're going through the presentation, you can either put those in the webinar room chat box, or you can also put those in the Q&A section of the webinar room. This is going to be a very interactive webinar, so we hope that you'll participate in both of those areas, and we'll have some polling we'll be doing as well. So be sure to participate in those ways. If you're using the webinar room chat box, just remember to click the everyone button so everyone can see your message there. And we have Charles back. Welcome back, Charles.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your patience, everyone. I guess like all of us, sometimes technology isn't perfect. But as I was saying, I'm just going to start from the beginning. My name is Charles Vilmorin. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Link Senior. Link Senior is the company that initiated the Activity Strong platform, movement, and initiative in order to not only empower, educate, and acknowledge the amazing work of activity and life enrichment professionals, but also give back to the industry and elevate the discourse around how we create the best communities possible for our elders and our teams. I'm very excited with today's topic, where we're going to introduce, formally and welcome Marvell Adams Jr., the founder and CEO of W. Lawson. Before I do that, just a couple words about Link Senior. We believe in very strong values. One of them is on the right-hand side, this idea of old people are cool. For many different reasons, we started this 6 years ago. One of them is that we're not fan of this segregation based on age, but we're also strong advocates of fighting ageism. And we believe that everybody is cool, including elders. And then on the left-hand side here, in partnership with NAP, NCAP, and Activity Connection, we're very proud of our dedication to the industry through many different initiatives, some of which are these bi-weekly webinars. Think Senior is a company that I'm honored to have started 15 years ago. We're based in Washington, D.C., and we actually touched the lives today of 50,000. Over the summer, we surpassed 50,000 lives that we touch through many amazing providers that range from lifeline communities to assisted living, memory care, and long-term care. And what it is that we do essentially is that we help these providers elevate engagement, elevate and make sure that every elder is engaged the way we want it and the way they deserve it. So if you have any interest in elevating engagement, please feel free to reach out. But one of the core aspects of our work is we're very proud of the fact that we are a quote-unquote evidence-based platform. Our work helps our clients and partners get amazing clinical and financial outcomes, and some of which were actually published in a peer-reviewed journal back in 2019. So back to today's speaker and presentation. I'm very excited actually to share with you some of the sessions and our speaker. As a reminder, these are some of the objectives that we will cover for CU purposes. And all of that to lead me to my excitement, Marvell. So Marvell, just so that everybody knows, I've known Marvell for years. We've actually had the opportunity to work in many different aspects. I like to call you, Marvell, kind of a friend, but also a guide on many aspects, including today's topic. It's also very exciting to see Marvell start this organization called W. Lawson, who essentially is a housing and community development company with a passion and focus on creating communities where inclusion and belonging are core values, core work. So with that introduction, and again, thank you for your patience with my technology. Marvell, thank you for joining us. I'll give you the screen and let you walk us through how we can all improve that journey of ours. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Charles. I appreciate it. Let's make sure I get showing here correctly.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Oh, is it? Okay, good. So you guys see like the regular, okay, good.
Correct. Yeah.
All righty. So welcome everybody. I just wanted to take a breath for a minute. Charles, thanks for the introduction. We have known each other for many years, and it's been fun to watch Linked Senior evolve in ways I think no one could have predicted. So congratulations. So thanks everybody for joining. My name is Marvell, as Charles mentioned, and we're going to talk about building a community, but doing so with inclusion and belonging in the forefront of our minds. So we're going to talk about kind of a few different greats that we've been talking about and seeing kind of in the news and just in general conversation. So the first one is the Great Resignation. So this notion of individuals throughout industries across the world saying, you know, I'm resigning either from this current line of work I'm doing, or from this industry, or just in the notion of wanting to start your own business, maybe. But the idea of how we engage with and consider our work really starting to be challenged very significantly over the past few years. And it didn't start because of the pandemic. It certainly was there before, but it was accelerated by the pandemic for sure. There's this notion of a great resignation, and what does that mean for us when it comes to motivations for folks and whether or not they choose, particularly in our field of senior and aging services, what does that mean for our ability to do the service that we have committed to do for older adults? So this next one is another great, but not perhaps what you may think. So the two individuals in this car, some may be represented on this webinar today, others may not be, but these are meant to be the leaders of our organization. In general, many leaders across aging services, companies, organizations, not-for-profits, for-profits, consultancies, are eyeing retirement. And some of that, again, was not caused by the pandemic, but in some ways, some folks had accelerated. People moved up the retirement dates. They changed kind of what they thought as being their life's work and their work-life integration. And so I show this slide to mean that there's another aspect of this that is a very impactful area of inclusion and belonging. It's around who leads our organizations and how we engage with the wider world, and what does that look like from a management and leadership perspective. So the Great Retirement is another great that's been going on. So the last one is not very often talked about, but it is the core of kind of the thesis of not only my own new venture, but also our conversation today. And that one is of the Great Rejection. So recognizing that older adults, particularly younger baby boomers, are starting to come around to the notion of, I don't want to move someplace and be segregated for any part of me. So I don't want to be segregated because of my age, meaning that this community only allows folks 62 years and older. I don't want to be excluded or I don't want to be segregated based on my race, meaning that maybe the community is mostly one race or ethnicity. I don't want to be segregated based upon my sexual orientation or my gender or my physical ability or my mental ability, a whole host of things. And we'll get into more facets of diversity in a moment. But there is more and more evidence to show that older adults are saying, hold on a minute, I don't live a segregated life currently, and I don't want to move or join community and have that change dramatically. So what does it mean to have the Great Resignation, the Great Retirement, and then the Great Rejection of living in a non-inclusive and belonging way? What does that mean for the work we do together? And so the bulk of our conversation today, of which there'll be a few different questions for you to answer, and thanks in advance to Megan for her help in bringing the questions up in a little bit. But we're going to talk about what does it look like to have your own journey begin around inclusion and belonging. And the thing that I will drive home to you right now and throughout our conversation is that it really does start with yourself and where you are. Doesn't start where you want to be, doesn't start where you saw and read in a magazine that you're supposed to be, but instead it really starts where you are yourself, and then perhaps how you fit into your organization's goals. So beginning your journey, right there, the first one, know thyself. Are you ready to welcome inclusion and belonging? And I put the word welcome very purposely because some of the questions that we're going to pose to you talk about two different aspects of, I think, beginning a journey of inclusion and belonging. One is inviting in differences. What does it mean to invite folks, or I hate that word, folks. What does it mean to invite other humans, other human beings in that are different than perhaps yourself, how you identify, different than your friends, different than your relative, different than the community at large? And then what does it mean to welcome those individuals when they show up, which is a very different thing. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Getting uncomfortable, and I would bring you back to these items as we continue our conversation, and I'm glad for Megan to have dropped the slide deck into the chat box. But get uncomfortable. Talking about how someone may be different than someone else, and then how to then welcome and embrace those differences and find a unity amongst them. There's no 100% comfortable conversation that can come and lead into that or lead out or through that. So at the end of the day, these are uncomfortable moments for us to have. You got to give something, if you want to give it an expletive, if you want to say it's care, if you want to say give something. But do your teams believe that you care about them as humans? Is there a part of this where individuals feel they are getting a paycheck and they are giving you a paycheck's worth of energy? Or is it that they are giving to an organization or to a supervisor that sees them as a human? and what does it mean for that person to be seen and be included in their organization and feel that they belong, which is at the core of really the necessity of someone to see themselves as being a part of an organization. Ceding power. So, we talked a little bit before about the great retirement and what does it mean for organizations to cede power and allow decision makers to kind of change? What does it mean to have an opportunity for inclusion to be in the management, supervisory, and executive leadership portions of the organization? And in some symbolisms, that means that the seats in the chair have to change. And then change something. What can you do right now? Because this is a very daunting topic that we'll discuss in the next 30 or 40 more minutes. But what can you change right now that is bringing such significance that you do see a forward momentum starting, even so small as within yourself, as opposed to the wider community? And then lastly, I'll stress this as much as I stress know thyself, is be honest and candid. You'll have some opportunities in the next few moments to be honest with yourself and perhaps candid with the group today, but not only candid as much as you would be with a group of folks of 500 on a webinar. But about what isn't working and why. So, there's a lot of things that go wrong, go awry, go off track when having conversations that are open and honest. And I think it's important for us to step back and say, what's the intent of the discourse, but then recognize within yourself, what will you and won't you do? What are you honestly saying to yourself that you want to do when it comes to embracing differences that may bring up a discomfort in you? So with that said, we're going to create a create a deconstructed invitation. So there's usually a few different parts in invitation. Who you're inviting, what you're inviting them to, where that place may be. But then the piece of this that I think many times gets missed is, what is it that yourself, your organization, your community, whether that may be your community in the cul-de-sac at home, it may be your church, it may be your civic group, but either way, what does it mean to denote as a community who you are? And then what's the education that takes necessary to learn about differences of others, and then how do you courageously engage? And then when is that actually welcoming going to take place? And what's your own party name, which is a fun way for you to be able to recognize that it may not be who you are right now that is planning this party, but it needs to be a person that is educated and learned beyond who you are right now, and so that future self. So Megan, if you could bring up the first poll. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, for this section, is thinking about who you are willing or seeking out to include. So, and we're going to think of this in kind of two different levels. So the outer realm of this diversity wheel, and by the way, there's a notation there from Johns Hopkins, who'd created this version of a diversity wheel, but others exist. So this outer realm of education, political belief, all the way around to religion and appearance. In using the poll here, we're going to ask you to click on and decide what aspect of diversity are you seeking to include. If you were to think to yourself, okay, I'm willing to start a journey right here, right now, and I'm going to choose a couple different groups of which to invite in order to be included. When you look at the outer realm, choose one of these areas to consider included. And give you an example. If I were to want to consider Episcopalians as being more included in my community that is maybe primarily Baptist, then I would be choosing religion as that aspect of diversity I'd want to include more of. Or maybe my community or myself has an interest in including and inviting in single parents. So that might be family that you're seeking to include that may be different than the traditional family makeup of those that are around me. I'll pause there just for a minute.
And Marvel, it just looks like for this, we have both questions came up at the same time. So we're asking people to answer based on the outer part of the circle for question 1 here on the poll, and then the inner part of the circle for question 2.
Perfect. Oh, I see. Yep, you can scroll down. So yes, the second part of it, and I love that this is broken up this way because, you know, the inner piece of it is a bit more intimate. It's a bit more perhaps uncomfortable than other aspects of the diversity wheel. But, you know, what other aspect are you seeking to include? So if that for me meant understanding or seeking to include individuals that have ADHD or diagnosed as or have symptoms of, that would be mental and physical ability. So we'll let you click on both of those for what you'd consider seeking to include. And Megan, I'll have to lean upon you of how long of a pause I should give.
Sure. It looks like we have about 52% of participants have put in their responses so far. So we'll give people another maybe minute here, and then I'll do the reveal on the answers and we can talk through those.
Awesome. So, and as folks kind of fill in, you know, the other areas that I would invite you to consider is, you know, there's a part of this where what we're asking you to do today is be a little bit courageous with yourself, because this invitation that you're creating is really for your own use. You know, no one's going to necessarily see or understand what you're seeking to be more inclusive of, but it does give you an opportunity to perhaps consider what differences may be around you that you historically, by whatever bias that may exist, and we all have them, whatever bias may exist, and consider what is it that at this point in your life that you're looking to include that perhaps was not a part of what you traditionally considered to be in your realm of a family or workplace or friendship.
Okay, Marvel, I think I'm going to go ahead and end the poll.
Okie doke.
We'll reveal the answers. Let me know if you can see that all right from your end.
I can. This is pretty cool. So when we, let's see, I'm going to scroll down. And Megan, is it correct that everyone can see these and can scroll and see them?
Correct, yes.
Cool. So these are, you know, we won't be able to do a debrief after each one of these, but I find it fascinating, particularly when folks left with these or given these options, what they would choose. And so I'm seeing family and language and communication skills as being at the top of consideration for inviting in differences in the outer realm, and then race and ethnicity, and almost a tie, three-way tie for the, I'd say, in the margin of error, if there was one for this poll, a race and ethnicity, age, and then mental, physical ability. I think I'm most fascinated by the fact that, you know, these are pretty courageous areas in which to engage. Age is seemingly a natural one for us because of who we serve, but also what I'll offer to you around age is that ageism is that almost sacredly held on to ism that is really still allowed in media. It's allowed very widely and pervasively social media and a whole bunch of, and where we work right now. But it's also a very unique one around the sense of ageism is an ism that many don't understand, but you will sooner or later. It may be something you feel more and more now each by time a year goes past for you, but that ism is one that we face every day, ironically, in our work. Mental and physical ability is certainly more and more a area of sharing of oneself that more and more individuals are finding the comfort to be able to do so. So Megan, I'm going to have us go on to the next one. And if you could pull up the poll, and I'll just talk about it a little bit to give people a little more room to perhaps consider. So on this one, what aspect of diversity are you willing to share and show others? And this, in your mind, may be an easy slam dunk of the exact same answers that you gave before. For others, it may be a real shade of gray, and for even others still, it may be a stark difference. But the question is really asking you to consider. You first invited folks to invited in differences. You've made that purposeful step, that intentful step of inviting in something that may be different than what you would normally be accustomed to engaging with or understanding. And so you're now being able to say back to that difference that you're invited in, who you are and who are you, what you're willing to share of yourself. And it brings with it kind of this sense of it typically, I think conventional wisdom would say it doesn't work so well to be able to invite in something different without explaining to that person, that company, that entity, whatever it may be, who you are yourself. I think it'd be difficult for you to go over and be invited to someone's home for dinner, and they refuse to tell you who they are. So in this same realm, consider the two circles, the outside circle from education all the way around to work experience, and what you would be willing to share or show others of yourself. One instance maybe be that you have a language or communication skill that maybe you are a stutterer, that when you get really nervous, that stuttering is something that happens. And so that would be in the area of language and communication skills. And then when you get into the inner circle and what you're willing to share, some aspects of this are very, as they say, front street. They're really out there for folks to see. Race and ethnicity many times can be an outward facing thing that makes an assumption about what someone's race or ethnicity may be. But it is easier to make that assumption, or should I say, it's more prevalently made an assumption about someone's race by looking externally. Age, maybe not so much, a gender identity or expression, national origin. So in these areas, what is it about yourself that you're willing to share or show others once you've invited in a difference? One might say that their being a woman is more of an identity for them than any other aspects of diversity. Some might say that their national origin, that being born in Jamaica is as far as a strong of an identity that they would want to share with someone than any other. So in this instance, give a thought to what would you share of yourself or show others of yourself when inviting in that difference.
Okay, Marvell, I think I'll do the reveal now. I'm just going to end the poll and I will show the results so that we can discuss.
Awesome. So I've done this in a few other instances before our session today, and so I get a little bit giddy seeing the results come back. But family and work experience seem to be pretty significant amongst the group when it comes to sharing of yourself. It's kind of a natural thing, so when folks introduce themselves, hi, my name is Marvell, I'm a husband, I'm a father of 3 kids, so it's a part of your identity, and it's one that we really readily share with folks. Some folks in academia may say, hey, I have a PhD in organizational behavior, and my subspecialty is X, Y, and Z, or for physicians to be able to say, where they did their fellowship or what their subspecialty is. But work experience also, even when you go to new employee orientation and meet new folks that may be joining, folks may share themselves that, hey, I've been here at this community for the last 10 years or 10 months or 16 years. But it's a readily shared part of one's identity in many circles. But then, circling down to the inner part of the diversity wheel. So race and ethnicity, along with age and mental ability, still being kind of those three major areas. And it's one that in some similuses, folks may say, well, race, it's a piece that you share, at least presumptively with folks, just by being. But age, you could one say as well. Mental ability and physical ability, perhaps too. But, in those categories, I still think there is a challenge that's being put before us more so than we ever have, that one's mental and physical ability is not a barrier or an exclusionary factor in the way that really it's been treated in the past. And keeping it on parity with an aspect of diversity with gender, with national origin, sexual orientation, and recognizing that parity is what inclusion is all about, and finding ways to broaden that tent. All right. Well, so we've done a couple different things. We have said to ourselves, this is what we'd like to do differently, meaning this is who we'd like to, or what group we'd like to invite that may be different than us. And then we've shared a little bit about what we'd be willing to share of ourselves. It's not surprising to see that gender identity, expression, and sexual orientation, no matter what the audience, there's still a real societal discomfort that comes around not only sharing when it comes to gender identity and expression, but also recognizing that it's a piece that is many times not welcome. It's a sense of not belonging can really set in when there's not a comfortable space for members of the LGBTQ plus community. So we're going to move on to the next part of our work today. So actually, no, I take that back. The next poll is around the community in which you're inviting folks into. So Megan, if you could pull that up, thanks. So you've done two things, 2 out of 3 aspects of creating an invitation. One is whom you're inviting to be included, who you are, who's doing the inviting, the inviter, and then really where are you inviting them to. So in this aspect, considering both the outer and the inner pieces of the diversity wheel, what aspect of diversity substantially describes your community? And community is really how you want to define it. So that might be, again, your community in which you work. Excuse me, it may be your neighborhood in which you go home to in the evening hours, or it could be a group that you belong to. It could be a fraternity that you've been a part of, a whole host. But as you define community, what aspect of diversity, being forced to choose one in each of these circles, that you would consider substantially describes your group. So an example, I'll go to the middle part of the wheel here. I think a fraternity from an Omega, from an historically Black college or university, might say that Black community would be a very strong, substantial description for their fraternity. They may also say that gender, meaning men, as being a substantial describer for it. But as you think about what that aspect of diversity may be, consider which part of the diversity wheel you would include it in. And the part of this that makes it, I think, a bit more difficult than the first 2 questions is you're really having to step back and consider how would you describe what you're a part of right now and what you're inviting folks into? Because, I think many of us know what it looks like when we've been invited to the party, but also recognizing that's really the easy part of it. That what does it look like when that person that's been invited shows up to that community that has had perhaps many of the same aspects for a while, and having invited in differences or a difference. What does that community say to that difference, like who they are currently? And again, giving a sense not only of who you are, who you're inviting, but where they're being invited to.
All right, Marvell, I'm going to end the poll and reveal our results for this section. There you go.
Cool, thank you. All right. So family, again, being a big part of how we describe our community that we belong to. And then age starting to edge up a bit from being amongst the top three to maybe in its own right, the first spot. I can't say as to why that would be the case for our very simple choices of polls today, but this gives me an indication that when you substantially describe the communities of which we're a part of, age does come into consideration a ton. If I make an assumption about a long-term care, life plan, retirement, senior living community, certainly those we serve, age is a descriptor that many externally and internally would make a substantial descriptor for the community. But also, as we're seeing in the demographics of those that serve in aging services provider communities, that we're getting older. I've seen a few more gray hairs certainly come up on my face and head over the years, but also there is an aging of, as we talked about previously, not only the leadership of the communities, but also supervisors and hands-on direct care staff. So it doesn't surprise me that age is edging its way up as a descriptor there. All right. So up next, and we're going to do these next two really fast because it's just asking a little bit about how you learn and how you take action. So the first question is, now that you've done the invitation, and the invitation is really, like we said before, the easy part. If you planned a kid's birthday party, making the invitation to the kid's birthday party for a bunch of 7-year-olds coming over, that is the easy part for sure. The harder part would be actually welcoming them to your home or to the Chuck E. Cheese or to the park or wherever it's going to be. So, but what actions will you take to learn more about this aspect of diversity that you'd invited in? So making the assumption that you would want to know more about and understand more as you seek to invite in differences, to learn more about those differences. And generically speaking, folks may want to read a book, they may want to do online research themselves, they may want to even take a class or other. And if you have an other idea, please type it in the chat for us to consider and capture. So I'm going to pause here and take a moment for you to vote and consider what action will you take to learn more about this aspect of diversity that you've invited in and now want to welcome. Before we move on from this one of the things that I always ask folks to consider is that this is really, everything we've talked about is really an introspective process. So up until this point, we really haven't asked you to do anything that is beyond just testing your own vulnerability with yourself and self-identifying and anonymously surveying what you're willing to do. But again, in this aspect of it, learning is a very can be a group thing, but at the end of the day, it's what you choose to absorb and are able to absorb. So online research, cool. So this is fascinating, but like I'll offer to you that this is probably not surprising to many folks. When I do this chat, perhaps in person or a bit more intimately, you know, online research is a very go-to where you can Google anything and everything. And, you know, I won't give any warnings about just surfing the internet, but what I will share is that, you know, when you educate yourself on differences, try to seek out information sources that speak the voice and come from the voice of that difference. Meaning that someone that wants to be out there as an educator around making benches, wooden benches, if that person puts himself out there to be that educator for that, and they've never sat on a wooden bench before, then you know you may want to consider another source. Take that absurd example as far as you'd like to, but what I'd share with you is each of these really do bring a great deal of potential to learn. But it's a matter of understanding the sources and being able to have some trust in them. So the very last one, at least from the poll standpoint, we're going to ask about is, and this is, where the road meets the road. A good friend of mine that I think actually was on this last go around, we did a session like this with Link Senior, Christopher Reitenauer, would tell me about how, because he's been doing engagement work for a really long time. And noting that, the closer individuals get to the it, whether the it is the goal or the milestone in the journey, or the it may be having a sense of accomplishment, or the it may be, just testing and pushing up against your own sense of of who you are and testing your own bias, the more uncomfortable it gets. And so what brings with that is, if you're going to continue your journey, is a word that Christopher, I love, that he brings into the thread is courage. What will you courageously do to engage this aspect of diversity? And that could happen in a whole bunch of ways, but just for our intents and purposes today, one might be a public forum, meaning going to some folks that may be going to a gathering. It may be going to a demonstration. Some of that may be engaging courageously one-on-one and having a conversation with someone else. And it doesn't mean that someone else represents or seems to represent the differences that you're inviting in. In fact, I would say that would not be the best way to go about understanding other perspectives. But where it becomes that courageous piece is that how do you engage and have a real dialogue in a one-on-one fashion? I put social media here because it's a piece of engagement that is that virtual engagement has become paramount, particularly after 3 years of a pandemic. And so engaging and being in community with and being friends with someone over social media is just as, and in some instances, more prevalent and impactful as it might be in person. And then for the others, feel free to put into the chat. But the idea of this question is, how do you courageously engage with this aspect of diversity that you've invited in? How do you, after educating yourself, then take a little bit of a leap and decide that you're going to do something a little bit different than you did the day before? So as the results of that last survey comes up, now you've turned me a little bit, my friends, because I am very surprised by this. So one-on-one, one, bravo to each of you, because I think this takes courage to be able to really have a dialogue where you are in an equal sitting or juxtaposition with someone, meaning that, you know, your voice is, for most measurement, going to be equal to the other person if you're doing that one-on-one and you're treating each other fairly. So kudos, you know, and what I would offer to you as you consider your own journey is that it's worth a little homework to understand how to have good conversations with individuals, and perhaps even having that a part of the journey. Social media and public forum being kind of equal there. So, but you surprised me there on the one-on-one. So, but congratulations, I'm really impressed. So, you know, the last one here, and what I'll do is ask them both at the same time, and feel free to put in one or both. But the second one, just kind of ask yourself, and if you're willing to share, put in the chat, when do you think you'll be ready by? So you created an invitation that the invitation went out, and you've educated and prepared to welcome this diversity, this difference into your community or to yourself. When will you be ready by? Some folks might say, I'm ready now. The party's the weekend, come on over, we'll have a good time, we're inviting you in. And some folks may say, you know, I've got, or we've got, or they've got a long way to go, and we'll be ready March of 2024, or we may be ready for, you know, this is Vision 2025 now instead. But what's that date going to be? And then when you think about your future self and the education that you're undertaking and the courageous conversations that you want to have, when I do this, not across multiple organizations at the same time, I ask folks to think of an alias to go along with the comments they've given. But in this case, consider it just your party name for the welcome reception that you're planning, and think of who your future self might be. And if you have a nickname that you'd like to share in the chat, I'm sure we could all take the chuckle. So Megan, at this point, I'm going to, should I stop screen sharing, or should I go on to the final slide?
Yeah, why don't you go on to the final slide there, Marvell? I'll drop in the link to the co-branded tip sheet again, and then also to your website. And Charles, I do think we had a couple questions come into the Q&A. If we want to go ahead and cover that. And I know one of those questions, Marvell, was, what if you're not ready to start the journey?
Yeah, that is a really, really good question. And I appreciate you asking that. So that is something that I think is a really important distinction to recognize. And what I would ask you to do is take an inventory of why that might be the case, that you're not ready. Because keeping in mind that, you know, we're talking about a journey here, and essentially we're talking about a journey that probably should not end, because we have a long way to go. And so if that first step of that journey is daunting to you, you know, take some time to press inventory about why that discomfort may be there or what's stopping it. And then turn around and realize that that's your checklist before you start your journey. Hola from Hawaii. Oh, oh my God. What that just really, that Charles, that really took me out of my space here. Like I really wish I was there in Hawaii with Pat, but with Patricia.
Yeah. Marva, just on that question, like on that question that you answer here, which is, what if I'm not ready? You know, I feel that sometimes, because that's the way I've experienced some of these things a little bit personally, is you have people, they see something that needs to be fixed and they just run at it, and they're great at just kind of go, 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 go. And then some people are more a little bit reserved about trying to think it all, and it is very difficult to process it all. And sometimes it's just them understanding that failure is part of the journey. Where do you see people fail? You know, I'm more the latter, more reserved. And sometimes if I understand these are the typical areas where people fail, but that's okay. Can you walk us through what you see from your vantage point? Because I feel that's helpful for at least some part of today's audience as well.
Yeah. Oh gosh, Charles. So, I would say in general, there is, hiccups and missteps can take place at almost any point in a journey of inclusion and belonging. But I'd say, I think folks stumble along the way when they don't take a moment to do a self-inventory. I think that's probably the biggest hiccup that takes place, because if you really, as I said before, if you really don't know yourself, then what you put out into the world as you seek more diversity will come across insincere, because you really are being a spectator as opposed to someone that is looking to engage fully with someone by not coming with your authentic self.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Marva, because I have two questions bouncing off of that. But in the comment, Marty Doring says, you're making a case that we are in control in stepping into diversity. And her point is that it also happens, right? And our skills help us respond. So maybe a question would be here, how do you cultivate these skills so that when it happens, I guess when it's either forced to us or that we don't have a choice, then we respond best? Do you have any thoughts about that?
I do. So, certainly it always helps to take a breath no matter what. And a nice little 3 count. I say it's a 7 count, by the way. And there's a lot of research around those 7 seconds. But I recommend folks to always, after they take that breath, to do one of 2 things. Ask a question of the other person.
Yeah.
And a question that only they know the answer to. So it can't be a leading question. Have you considered doing this? Or why do people act like that? It needs to be a question that only they know the answer to, not the people they represent in your mind, but only they know the answer to. Or if you can't find yourself doing that and you feel a discomfort inside you, in 7 words or less, describe how you feel in a statement and share it with that person or that group or that individual. And it could be, I'm suddenly very anxious. And just stop.
Yeah.
Because that's about the sincere thing you could do in that moment if you really are finding yourself in a space where you're having a conversation that you haven't had before, or experiencing a situation that you haven't experienced before.
So your advice, if you don't mind me rephrasing, is to acknowledge where you stand emotionally, or where you where you stand, and expressing these with simplest words as possible. That's pretty significant. Thanks for the advice. Part of that also is a question that we actually now have in the Q&A, which is from Carolyn. And she's simply asking, what if we are ready, but others are not? And I would understand that it's other team members or other people that we are around. What's your advice there?
And I'm sorry, can you, I just didn't hear part of it, Charles. Could you repeat?
Sorry, what if we are ready, we personally, but the team or the people around us are not as ready as we are?
Yeah. So 100% of you will have people around you that are not at the same level of readiness that you are. And that the level setting is really important. But it's a very complex question. So what I would give to you in this setting is, I find one of the better ways to level set when you don't know where everybody is, is to do some sort of exercise of shared learning. And I'll go right back to the responses you guys gave before. As cliche as it may sound, sometimes a book club is a good thing for the sake of reading something together and sharing your thoughts about the book versus the thoughts about what the coworker said versus the thoughts about what I accidentally said, but instead focusing on some sort of third party amalgamation of a knowledge or thought that you guys have agreed upon to learn together and have a shared learning experience and talk about it. The other thing I would offer for level setting is there are great tools out there. For those that you don't know, she's going to kill me for doing this, but Marsha Coleman at Friend Services for the Aging, who's absolutely phenomenal individual, but she utilizes, it's not her, it might be their tool. Anyway, they have a great tool for doing an inventory, and actually, I know it is a tool that's used more widely, but and it's an inventory that allows you to kind of take one of those Myers-Briggsy kind of tests that says how are you yourself when it comes to being ready for a journey of inclusion or being inclusive or testing your own bias, and then how you see that. And then there's another set of questions that then details back to you how perhaps you really are and where that disconnect may be. So our thought process of where we think we are and where we really are is what a good inventory tool will do. And I would say that that would be another way to help level set people in the organization that are at different places.
Thanks, Marvel. You know, it reminds me a couple of years ago, I had taken the IAT, you know, the implicit association test from Harvard, which is a great one of these tools. And actually, I can paste that here. It includes some of the things that you just mentioned. You know, it's thanks for the answer, Marvel. You actually kind of wrapping up another question, which, well, a reminder that somebody in the chat in the Q&A was saying that, you know, please let's not forget that this is, you know, obviously for our residents, but also all of our team members, right? We're talking about every human beings that we interact with or touch and so on and so on. We did have, I think, one last question here, and I'm anxious to hear your thoughts here. If you think about this as a journey, right? Not necessarily saying that one is better, one is more advanced than the other, but you do have this situation where team members, so people on the call today, might have taken more steps than their resident. So here we have somebody that says, I serve a population that's a primarily white and Baptist, and so on and so forth, with a tendency to be Bible literalist. I, on the other hand, am inclusive. I have a daughter who identifies as queer and all of that. So one could think that that individual might have asked more questions than the bulk of her residents. And yet I feel inauthentic telling them how I feel and hear. So there's this disconnect also from the team members and the population they might serve. Do you have any thoughts of that? Because I'm sure that that person is not the only one to go through this. What are your thoughts and advice on that?
If am I hearing correctly, Charles? But it sounds like a question about being one's authentic self in those yeah. That's a big one, because I'll tell you that I believe that the work we do is highly estimated, underseen for what it really is, which is humans caring for and serving other humans. And we do that in the place that many of them call home, which is like you just can't get any more intimate. Like you could maybe say hotels, but not quite. The person doesn't live there. The cruise ship, they don't live there. The college campus, they don't live there. The hospital, maybe they live there, but they don't, you know, they usually haven't considered it their home. So how do you bring your authentic self into that realm is very difficult, because everything about our training tells us that you shouldn't. And it's the unlearning that we have all to do together. And I don't know if I have an answer. I think that it's a matter of first deciding not what the resident or the group or the organization is willing to accept of yourself. Start with what part of yourself, as we did earlier in the exercise today, that you're willing to share.
Right.
And then the question is, are you willing to share that everywhere or just certain places when you're comfortable? And I think both are fine, but you know, the advice I would give is don't limit yourself based on someone else's presumption or assumption of you. Decide what you want to share of yourself, and then decide who really is deserving of you sharing that with them.
That's great advice, Marvel. I was pausing here because, you know, I know you know this, my background is French. I was born and raised in France, and we don't have the same boundaries, not saying that we're better or different, but I think it's true that understanding what it is that we're comfortable sharing is really important in order to assess the rest. So thank you so much for sharing. One last question, which is me more like, I know we're at different stages, all of this, all of us, but in the audience, if there are individuals and or organizations that want to take the first step, you know, what's the best advice you can give them?
Oh gosh, so I'd offer two things. One, you're welcome to call me or reach out to me if
Yeah.
you'd like to. I'm always happy to help. But two, you know, I would say really make a decision, or at least start to work towards what time and energy and resources are you yourself or your organization or an amalgamation of both
Mm-hmm.
going to put forth, not willing to, because willingness, I was going to say willing, not willingness. What are you going to put forward for resources and time and energy, and then do it? And you know, some of that may be folks like myself and others out that do consultation. But I, you know, am a baby in this realm, but deciding what resources that you need to bring to bear, and take that step to start inviting those resources in.
Cool, thank you. Thank you so much, Mavad. If you don't mind unsharing your screen, I'll share the last few slides
Yes.
here. And yeah, no problem. So everyone, I hope this was helpful. It was for me, so I'm sure it was for all of you. As Megan mentioned, Marvell was kind enough to partner with us in creating a tip sheet for us to at least get started. But I think, you know, for me personally, as I've known Marvell for years, I'm grateful to call you, Marvell, my friend. I can only thank you for not only being with us today, sharing some of these thoughts, but I always feel that most of the times when I connect with you, it's all about that dialogue and both of us collaborating to get to the next step. And I think this is something that I'm deeply grateful that I've kind of nurtured in our relationship, is understanding it's a journey, understanding that next step. And all of you in the audience, I encourage you to consider, as you're taking these next steps, either the resources that Marvell shared with us, or like he said, just drop a note. He responds pretty well and actually really quickly, usually through his emails or his phone calls. But please contact him and make some of these resources part of your very important journey. So thank you all for joining. Thank you, Marvell, for having us. As always, a great addition to our, and essential addition to our series. As we continue collaborating with these Activity Strong initiative, I wanted to share with you one of our biggest event of the year, which is one of our gatherings. So the next one is on September 20th. And I personally am extremely excited about it, simply because I'm passionate about the field of dementia care. And this one is all about dementia care. It's called Decoding Dementia Gathering. It's on September 20th. And there are going to be 3 parts to the session. One of them, believe it or not, Lego can be serious, and it's actually documented and shown. And so we have an amazing speaker by the name of Loretta Vine, who's going to tell us about dementia and how we can use Lego, what's called Lego serious play, in our communities. We have a break with our amazing Dr. Jennifer Sauter, who's going to be talking about some of our updates with the Resident Engagement Institute. And the second session itself is Danielle Palmer, joined by Abby Darkangelis, and it's all about dementia inclusivity. They're going to share about their journey. And then the last session is, we have a break, sorry, with Kate and Wally talking about a coalition around dementia and talk about remanaging dementia, sorry. And then the 4th session here, the person comes first by 2 amazing professionals, Kirsten Jacobs from Leading Age National and Mariah Bernhard from Christian Living Communities. So that is an exciting event. And then in October, we have a session called The Perfect Day in Dementia Care, also about dementia care. This is on October 25th, sorry. And it's also by Dr. Jennifer Stelter with her partner, Jessica Ryan. So with all of that, wishing you all, including you, obviously, Marvell, an amazing rest of your Tuesday. Thank you all. Thank you, Marvell. Thank you, Megan. And look forward to this continuing dialogue and elevating our profession and industry. Thank you.